Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
Okay, it is Wednesday, just ahead of Jeff Paterson. All of our guests today, including Jeff, brought to you by the Alberni Power and Marine RPM Group. Located in Port Alberni, Alberni Power and Marine is one of Vancouver Island's most trusted boat dealerships, the largest Mercury Marine dealership in Canada. Their service team just won for the fourth straight year a CSI score above the national average. Make your appointment for the 2022 boating season at albernipowermarine.com, just ahead of Jeff. Delaney's OK Tire in Langley, inbox Sam in Richmond. Donnie is super negative all the time. Bruce hasn't been fired. Good grief. Again, Sam in Richmond. I was just taken aback by what I perceived, and a lot of people perceived, as criticism toward the head coach by his bosses.
It was.
Yesterday.
They did not paint a great picture, but he could be back.
Jeff was there. Jeff Paterson joining us now from the Rink Wide podcast. And Sakaris and Price, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, guys.
Your takeaway from yesterday's media session with Rutherford and Alvin.
Yeah, I was surprised that there was a firm line drawn in the sand after listening to Bruce on Monday. And I have to assume, and that's all it is an assumption, but I have to assume that Bruce Boudreau was armed with the same knowledge that we ultimately were given yesterday by Jim Rutherford. Like, I can't imagine that Rutherford was saying things to the media yesterday that he hadn't already said to Bruce Boudreau. But Boudreau came out at his season-ending availability on Monday and spoke glowingly about how much he wanted to be back and how much he thought management wanted him back, and it made it sound like it was a formality. And then Jim Rutherford came, and the tone turned. Surprisingly for me, I was expecting that you were going to hear more from management along those same lines, that these two are in lockstep, that it's just a matter of time here and that they'll get something done, or at least they're confident they'll get something done. Instead, Jim Rutherford firmly put it at the feet of Bruce Boudreau, and he's got a decision to make now. The job is there if he wants it under the terms that have been prescribed. So no extension coming, but now Bruce Boudreau has the better part of 3 weeks here to step back and decide if there's an offer out there that he thinks is more attractive, if there's a situation that he thinks is better, if there's more security. He's a 67-year-old man. Let's just be honest here. He's not going to have many opportunities beyond this. Yep. And so if security is ultimately what he is looking for, then I guess I can't blame him if he shops himself on the open market after the job that he did here. But it is that bird in the hand situation. He knows that he's got Thatcher Demko, he's got Quinn Hughes, he's got Elias Paterson, he's got Bo Horvat, and for the time being, he's got JT Miller under contract as well. He knows what he's got here. He knows what he was able to do with this group. But I'm with you, Donnie. There were some pointed comments that I wasn't expecting about style of play and performance and things that have to. I mean, this guy delivered at a 650 winning clip, and the president of hockey operations is, throwing darts at some of the things that weren't done well enough. Ultimately, did they make the playoffs? No. And that was my sense yesterday, that from both Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin, they're not messing around. This isn't about scratching and clawing to get into the playoffs. This is about what's best for the organization to ultimately make it a Stanley Cup contender.
Zone exits, breakouts brought into question, structure, too much dependency on Thatcher Demko. You've been around for a while, Jeff. You ever heard anybody, come up with some criticism like that towards a head coach, somebody in charge?
No, and again, I mean, there was such a good vibe around this group over these final 57 games. Ultimately, they came up short of their goal, and that was making the playoffs. And the bar does have to be raised in this market. Yep. Just getting to the playoffs, that can't be the bar. And so here you've got guys with championship pedigree, and I think they understand that part. But, if you step back and look at it, Donnie, zone exits and running into trouble, as Jim Rutherford pointed out, well, that's not Quinn Hughes. So we move past Quinn Hughes. Who are you looking at in terms of running into trouble in your own zone? OEL and Tyler Myers were the guys that logged the most minutes beyond Quinn Hughes. I think you lump Luke Schenn in there as well, knowing that the organization liked a lot of what Luke Schenn does, but puck skills aren't his strong suit. And so, I thought it was interesting that Jim Rutherford also said, these are things that can be corrected. So then is it personnel or is it not personnel? Is that meaning that this is solely on the coaching? Because again, they did a lot of winning under Bruce Boudreau. So, yeah, I mean, I walked away. My takeaway ultimately was just surprised at the tone and the tenor a day after the head coach had made it, expressly clear that he wants to be back here and to carry on and sort of pick up where he left off.
Jeff, what I like about Jim yesterday, he also said, look, great record down the stretch, but we got to get younger. We got to get faster. We got a ton of work to do. He didn't come out and say everything's great and we're going to keep it the same. We're going to come back with the same roster. At least it looks like there's going to be some good changes here this summer.
I agree with you that Jim Rutherford commands the room. Having been in that room yesterday, you can understand that this guy's been at this a while. I said he's got the Stanley Cups to show for it. So you have to sit and listen and respect his viewpoint on all of these things. And I guess my concern is, Rick, that they express this need to create cap flexibility. Yeah, that's fine. But in the same breath, they don't want to take a step back. They want to improve. Well, they also have these massive contracts that they have to deal with, starting with Brock Besser, and then they said that they would get around to, when the time was right, talking to JT Miller and Bo Horvat beyond that. So really, you're trying to serve three different masters. You're trying to create cap space, you're trying to improve the hockey club, and then you're looking at long-term big money contracts, and I'm not sure that those three things can all happen together. So I do think that there should be some in the fan base that have to brace themselves here, that ultimately, maybe there is a little bit of a step back next season for this group, that maybe they don't pick up where they left off under Bruce Boudreau, and that in order to create the cap flexibility, because ultimately you need some of that cap flexibility. And I look at a really good team like Colorado, and yet Colorado, already a good team, was in position to pounce to grab Devon Taves because the New York Islanders weren't in a position to give him the contract he was looking for. I think that's what the Canucks, I mean, they've got these building blocks. Thatcher Demko, Quinn Hughes, Elias Paterson, we know the names. But now it's about surrounding those players. And right now, they can't do that. The whole idea would be, keeping this team intact. But if you keep this team intact, this team didn't even make the playoffs. And it's about building on this and improving what you've got here. But they don't have the flexibility right now to do that. So these are the challenges. And it's going to be a fascinating offseason to watch. I kind of thought that the coach would be, scratched off the to-do list. But clearly, and that was the other thing, too. Like, I was surprised that Jim Rutherford, knowing this market, and I know he's relatively new here, but it's a Canadian hockey market, he essentially held up Bruce Boudreau's contract for all to see yesterday. Like, I was surprised that he was willing to share the June 1st deadline because, guys, if this thing goes 3 weeks, like, imagine the days ticking down to that deadline. Like, it's going to be an absolute frenzy in a market like this one of what's Bruce going to do. I kind of thought Jim Rutherford might be able to just get around it and say, we want an answer in a couple of weeks here. But the fact that he laid it bare there, again, maybe that's putting a little bit of the pressure on Bruce Boudreau to make the decision and figure it out where he wants to coach here.
That's a great point about the June 1st because there was a lot of people surprised last night. I won't tell you who, but that June 1st deadline was announced last night. And they're lucky that Demko's contract ain't up the way they're talking about him because that guy would be making a ton more. That's one of the best things Jim Benning ever did was getting Demko under those numbers. Hey, the Young Stars are back in Penticton. He did announce that. Jim Rutherford, your thoughts, Jeff, on that back in the Okanagan?
Yeah, it really is one of the great events, and I was fortunate enough to cover a handful of them. Elias Paterson, in sort of his Canuck debut, was among the highlights of my time in Penticton. But it's just it's a great time. Penticton, after Labor Day, the weather is still spectacular, but the kids are back in school, and Penticton kind of goes back to being that sleepy town. And then all of these young hockey prospects arrive, and people in the hockey world, scouts and media, and it's just a great setting. So I get that some of it was COVID related, and I'm just glad that it's back, going back to Whistler for training camp. Although, did you see that training camp's listed for 2 days?
Yes.
Like it was 3 on-ice sessions last year in Abbotsford, and I thought that was short. And then the announcement yesterday that Whistler, and look, the players will love the fact that they're getting to spend a little bit of time in Whistler, but only 2. I mean, it's incredible how short training camp is. Just come in, get a couple of skates under you, and then get on with the preseason. Yep. But the fact that development camp is back after the draft as well. Again, now that we're starting to come out of the pandemic and it feels like, a little bit more regular, a little bit back to normal, And, oh, yeah, how about the announcement? Like, ownership is willing to spend some serious dough on the renovations to Rogers Arena. And I know that won't really impact the fans, but I suppose on some level it does if they think that increasing the amenities and modernizing the amenities around Rogers Arena is going to help retain the players that they've got, but also maybe be able to go and sell to some of the free agents, hey, whatever it takes. But this is ownership. And for the last couple of years, ownership got hammered for not wanting to buck up and not wanting to spend a lot of money and laying off staff members. This is significant and serious investment. And I think that that's a good sign to the fan base and to the greater hockey world that, the Canucks want to make sure that they have every competitive advantage and, somewhere along the line going to get to a practice facility as well. But in the short term, it's going to be a busy season or a busy off season, knocking down walls at Rogers Arena to try to modernize things and make that place as comfortable as possible for the players that'll be part of this team next season.
And Jeff, before we let you go, I know you're looking forward to, I might not be able to get out there, but Kamloops versus Vancouver, the Giants versus the Blazers, second round of the WHL playoffs. Great atmospheres in both buildings. Thanks for this, Jeff.
All right, and I guess I had a chance to call games for both of those teams, but
I did. Yeah.
I am a Kamloops Blazer at heart, so we'll see how it goes. What a story for the Vancouver Giants. A hat tip to them for knocking off Everett, and looking forward to a great second-round series.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Jeff Paterson from Zakaris and Price. We'll talk to him next week, and the Rink-wide podcast